Hey, this is Tim from PC Gamer. I'm joined by Phil.
Hi, this is
And
Phil.
yeah, we are, as well as being Tim and Phil, probably the two biggest Destiny 2 players on the team by hours sunk so far. I won't say how many out of a sense of good decorum. But last week, Phil, we got to see a hands-off demo with Bungie via Discord. So we got to watch the second mission in the Witch Queen campaign, the Witch Queen being the new expansion, which drops on 22nd of February, so a couple of weeks from now, if you're listening to this, roughly when it comes out. What did you make of the campaign?
I really like the look of the new area. So the campaign, I guess, will primarily be set in Savathun's throne world, which, if you're not a huge Destiny player, throne worlds are like hive realms.
I can feel you mentally calculating like how much lore to drop at this point.
How much of this do we want to be taken up by deep lore explanations?
So she is the titular Witch Queen. She's the goddess, the hive goddess of trickery and cunning. The kind of the big plot device is that she has stolen the light for this expansion. The light being the power that juices up us Guardians, gives us the ability to do space magic, and she's kind of imparted that power to her undead army of kind of bone-clad warriors, and they're going to start using the same kind of fancy ults that we've been using over the course of the last 7 years or so on us. How I mean, it was kind of hard to tell because the mission we saw was played on like normal difficulty, and one of the hooks is that this campaign, kind of leaning back into Bungie's Halo days, is going to have a legendary variant with double loot, and loot's going to drop during the missions, and they've really kind of talked up the idea that this campaign is going to be a repeatable thing that you're going to want to dive back into, I guess, because look, these missions in the past have been very expensive for them to make in terms of hours and money, and then it's the kind of, usually as a player you blow through them in a couple of days, if that, usually in an afternoon, and then you're on to like, well, what's the long tail grind? Whereas it seems like they want the campaign to stick around. You can select it, I think, forever from a menu, and I assume there's going to be incentive to do that.
Yeah, both normal mode and legendary mode are both replayable. As they're accessing it, you can sort of see the list of missions and things. So yeah, that seems like a good move. It's weird how much kind of they put into things like Beyond Light's campaign or whatever, the cutscenes, some cool mission areas, and when was the last time you were even able to play it?
There's that one in Beyond Light, I think, in the like Reese Reborn area, like to the north of Europa, and you like barely ever go back there, and it's like massive amounts of geometry and like cool shit they built that you don't touch. So I guess they're trying to avoid that. We saw a little bit of the Hive Guardians in action, like I say, on normal, so kind of hard to gauge the difficulty. But what did you make of them? Do you think like on Legendary they are going to be pretty pokey opponents?
I mean, on Legendary, I think they will be a danger, and that's kind of exciting. I do think, I guess the last few weeks and months of Bungie kind of hyping them up to see them in just a normal campaign mission and see, the boss get chunked down relatively easy, to see the obvious telegraphing of his super attack, and it's like, oh yeah, it's still a Destiny AI enemy.
The concern's gonna be 3 Arbalest shots and like Bob's your auntie's living lover, but. The thing that did give me pause was seeing that, I think closing out the mission there was a wizard, which is the flying hive enemy, pop the Stormcaller ult, which is like kind of a Palpatine hands from Star Wars, and I can imagine that being a huge annoyance on any sort of like on any kind of high difficulty level or anything with kind of like arc damage increased. That could be upsetting for sure.
Absolutely, especially like lightning chains between players. So everyone's going to get in there, think they're safe, but they're only running 3 resilience, so the sword pops and they wipe.
We didn't really see much of it, but there is talk as well of like the kind of the hive now like empowering each other. There's mention of these lucent moths. I mean, moths not a great video game antagonist historically, but could be interesting here. So the way that the moths seem to work is that they'll kind of provide a shield to the hive that is host to the moth, and then when you pop the shield, the moth flies across to another guy,
to a new guy who also gets a shield. Yeah, I mean, this all seems to be Bungie loves to push players towards build crafting. Like you see it in the way they do mods for like Grandmaster Nightfalls and for various high-end activities. So another source of shields, another thing that can kind of potentially upset you during a match game activity where the shield element type actually matters. They love that stuff. And
I like when they kind of push you into thinking about like what your solution is to a particular encounter slightly differently. I remember back in the Wrath of the Sheen raid in Destiny 1. Do you remember when in the second encounter there were certain enemies where if you headshot them, it would release like a bunch of bullshit that would then damage you? So you were kind of incentivized not to headshot.
Yeah.
So that was like muscle memory that you'd built up over literal years, like you having to fight against it. They talk thematically about the campaign, the idea of you being a psychic detective,
yes,
and kind of using this deep sight mechanic to uncover hidden platforms or to unblock previously blocked routes. They also have talked a bit about having kind of raid/dungeon mechanics in the legendary campaign that differs a little bit from the normal. It was like pretty hard to see how deep that was going to be.
Based on the second mission, and like we also spent a little bit of time in the patrol zone, there's a bit of a disconnect there between the idea of dungeon/raid style mechanics and what the psychic detective deep sight stuff actually manifested at, which was very much there was a glowy ball of ethereal mist that you walked up to, held square the PlayStation controller he was playing on, and some platforms spawned. And it's like, yes, I have interacted with Queen's Foil in Dreaming City before as well.
It's weird because the game has always kind of there's this like continuum between press X to reveal, and then at the other end, people on the Raid Secrets Reddit literally having to use like World War II style code ciphers to crack messages to solve puzzles. I mean, like things like when they were running that maze to get Bastion, which was insane, like stuff that I'd never want to engage with. But there's like nothing in between, right? There's no kind of like, it's either like baby simple or like,
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the in-between stuff is like what we see in dungeons, where it is, you'll get challenged a bit in terms, you'll have to work out some mechanics on the fly, but it's never, you're not looking at a 24-hour completion like, raid teams going into the Last Wish.
The thing I kind of wrote down while watching the campaign, and bear in mind we were watching it on a fairly kind of like blocky artifacted stream, but it was more Destiny, right? And like for you and I, like that's kind of like we've already like bought a ticket to see the show, right? We're gonna play, we're gonna, and unless something absolutely heinous happened to the way the game felt, you can be very confident you're going to enjoy it in a way that perhaps you aren't with other games.
That's it. I mean, I've bought in already, so there is just like, I really hope. Again, we only saw the second mission, so I really hope like this psychic detective stuff actually manifests, because I think given the subject matter, and like Savathun has all been about lies and plans and schemes, like they've really got the opportunity to showcase something special there, and the fact that they're making it replayable, hopefully that means that it will be worth replaying.
I really want there to be some kind of like big rug pull in the campaign where like just what we thought was happening isn't, or some character comes back that we'd forgotten about, or like I really, like you say, there's been so much build up to her, coming center stage as the antagonist, that unless there's some real big switcheroo, I feel like there has to be something.
They've tipped their hands a bit as well, because in the sort of 50-minute trailer / documentary thing they put out yesterday as we record this, like they mentioned Season of the Risen, which is the season that launches alongside the campaign. Like that is about Savathun trying to push out from her throne world and stuff. So that really makes it sound like the season this year are still going to be about Savathun. Like she's going to continue to be a big threat in some way. Like that's my hope based on that.
I don't think they're going to kill her off. Yeah, I think you're right, because that's been one of the problems with previous expansions. Is you kind of like, even with Taken King, it's like, well, you killed Oryx after like about an hour and a half.
Like they built up a cool villain, and then they killed him.
I mean, I suspect she won't actually be the raid boss either. I think that will be something else. And I think, like you say, she will. I think they've learnt their lesson. They're much better now at kind of telling these, more long form narratives. And I think she'll be with us as part of this trilogy. Which,
I mean, they've invested in this character for at least a year, and hopefully that means they know, like, they've got something good to showcase here.
So I guess we should probably quickly touch on the the new weapon archetype that was in the trailer, which was the glaive. It's I described it as a steak knife on a pole. It's kind of a medieval type weapon. It's the first time they've done a melee weapon in first person, the other melee weapon being swords, but swords are very kind of sweepy and AoE, and this is much more kind of jabby and stabby, but you can also fire it, and you can also charge it up, and then by doing damage, and then once it's charged, it has a shield, and you can use that shield to kind of play strategically to resurrect people who've got killed in awkward spots and stuff. It seems like one of those weapon types where, and I think we've seen this a bit from their weapon design recently, where they're kind of like they're bundling a lot of effects together, which usually works out quite well. But how did you feel about the glaive? Are you excited to glaive?
I think it's tricky. I think I am, just for the immediacy of it, and hey, new weapon, that's cool. Like when they added bows, and it was like, I'm going to use one because it's cool. So what it will be like in terms of utility, there's the initial excitement, and then you've got to think to like, okay, am I going to be equipping this for a raid run? Am I going to be equipping this for a nightfall? Am I going to use it in PvP? Probably not, but we'll see.
You know, there'll be like these like meme lord people who are just like all in on glaives. Like they will only try and.
It's going to be sword glaive bow builds for days.
Because with the charge shot, they were saying you kind of it's slightly slow firing. It's not quite like a fusion rifle.
Yeah, you've got to lead your shots and stuff, which.
I didn't feel with the glaive it had quite the same player fantasy as bows. Like ever since bows came in, there's been people just trying to fucking Legolas their way through in every encounter, regardless of how well suited it was to a bow.
Like bows and swords are really obvious, but melee weapon that fires a slow projectile that also can cast a barrier that you can use to heal. It's not as obvious, is it? It's not as clean, but
it gave me slight Hexen vibes looking at it, seeing it kind of sticking out in front of you, going like pew pew. What was your kind of immediate like? Did you have an immediate kind of like this is going to pair well with X and Y? Like I was kind of thinking like maybe like a submachine gun, like a Huckleberry, something that's fast firing and you could just mow stuff down. But then the glaive for close stuff and a rocket launcher, maybe that could be like a play.
Yeah, I was trying to work it out based on the campaign mission, like seeing how much damage it was actually doing and trying to get a sense of that. It doesn't help that you've got this charge shot as well. Like I think a few hits felt a bit like weak. And I was like, that's disappointing. And then they did such a charge shot that took a yellow bar's health down pretty nicely. It's like, okay. It's starting to come together.
And so they're also making 3 exotic variants of the glaives, and these are class specific. So one for Hunter, one for Titan, one for Warlock, and those have then bespoke effects. So the Warlock one, you can deploy a healing turret when it's charged up. The Titan one, you can pop down like a baby ward at dawn, and the Hunter one, in what appears to be a theme for the new Hunter stuff, seems slightly phoned in and just kind of does an arc wave of lightning. I think it's boring, but probably quite good.
This is the thing. I've seen some people complain about like, oh, hunters get stiffed again, and it's like, when has more damage been? When has lightning chain damage ever been a bad thing? Like, it might not be exciting.
Love to cry. It's unbelievable. That said, it feels like as you and I think are both kind of committed to the Warlock cause.
Sure.
And we've got some pretty nice stuff coming. So they're
quite spicy, isn't it?
So each class is getting, in terms of armor, 1 stasis exotic, kind of filling out that kit, and then 1 non-stasis exotic. And for the Warlocks, they're getting some gloves that give you double cold snap grenades. They are called, he looks it up, the Osmiomancy gloves.
Sounds about right.
I feel like no one's going to use those for double cold snaps at all. They're going to be the 2 Bleak Watcher tower build, and you're going to be able to make actually like a pretty like crazy support build all round, because you could have the double Bleak Watcher gloves, you could have the glaive putting down a healing turret as well. You could even run like the Lumina boots.
They're buffing Lumina.
Spitting out, with Lumina. So it seems like there's, well, I guess you could run Lumina with the fancy glaive, but Warlock has just an ever kind of burgeoning array of support options. And they're also getting, I do feel like the design space is starting to shrink with exotics, because the boots they're getting are ones that switch your healing rift to just also be able to.
The other way around. Your empowering rift will give you heals. presumably on kill, it looks like, because they mentioned it's like devouring boots. So it will work a lot like the Void Devour effect, I imagine, where if you stood in your Empowering Rift, you'll probably regen some health as you kill things, which you could do quite easily in an Empowering Rift.
I mean, they tried to get empowering. They tried to encourage you to use empowering rift for a while. Like the Starfire protocol buff was really actually strong, but just not having the heal rift is such a kind of expensive commitment, right? That they've kind of just gone fuck it and gone, all right, you can have both.
If we want to dig into Warlock stuff for a bit, like this is a good point to also talk about some of the Void 3.0 rework stuff.
Yeah, which you saw quite a bit of.
Yeah, so I dug into quite a bit of what they showed there. They were playing as a Warlock and moused over a lot of text, and I was furiously taking notes, thinking, I can see some builds happening. So one of the new aspects they've got, Child of the Old Gods. This will.
It sounds like a prog rock album, doesn't it? It's so
absolutely. That is Destiny's final form, really.
Yeah.
So that is another type of turret. When you put a rift down, you'll generate this little void soul.
What's the void buddy?
It's the void buddy. And when you shoot an enemy, the void soul will go over and weaken them, so they'll take extra damage, they'll shoot less, all of those effects. But it will also provide an additional effect, which is dependent on what type of rift you're running. So if you're running a healing rift, you'll get extra grenade or melee energy, but if you are running Empowering Rift, it will heal you as well. It's another form of regen. So I can really see, like, between that and the exotic, there are some really sort of tanky void builds that are going to emerge out of this.
I mean, we're not quite into like Path of Exile territory, but the build crafting really has come on. I think for people who haven't been playing the game, I mean, there are now like multiple kind of suites of mods you can run, and then once you kind of synergize those with, like you say, this new modular class system, which leans into what was done with Stasis in Beyond Light, in that you can pick and choose from a kind of chocolate box of traits and abilities, basically.
Yeah, Stasis.
You can make some pretty weird stuff.
I guess to explain some of the terms, so yeah, Stasis uses a different system to the light classes currently. So the light classes, you pick a tree, and they are pairs of 4 abilities that kind of make that define what that tree does. Whereas Stasis is all about, you slot in aspects, which are kind of the elements of that build or elements of that subclass, and then fragments are class agnostic, but they sort of just enhance things or change things in little ways. And Stasis has turned out to pair so well with, like, especially the seasonal mod type things like elemental wells. I've got so many elemental well based Stasis builds now, and like when you really get one that fits together, it just feels like every part of that build is kind of synced towards one goal. It's really nice.
But also, I think what they've done really well is with the Stasis stuff, they've lent into having weapons that specifically play into those aspects and fragments. So there's a sidearm, and then more excitingly, there's Aga's Scepter, the trace rifle, and then Ice Luna can get the headstone perk, which creates these freezing crystals, which when you proc them will then trigger a lot of your other effects that you've kind of already built for. And interestingly, the reason I'm kind of slightly long-windedly saying that is I was listening to Chris Proctor, who's one of the main weapon designers, on a podcast recently, the Massive Breakdown podcast, and he was saying that headstone perk for Stasis is going to be the gold standard for kind of effect-based perks, and by effect I mean ones that tie into the elements. And he was asked, like, are you going to do one for like something like headstone for void, solar, and arc? And he was like, absolutely, that's the goal, and we want to make those up to headstones level. So I do wonder whether, like, maybe we'll see something void based, because they talked as well about verbs, right? They want to have these verbs. So like the verbs are kind of basically invisibility, devour, and then there's the kind of titan thing. Is it weaken, or it's the thing that
so there's 3 positive verbs and there's 3 negative verbs. The negative verbs are like weaken, volatile, and something else. We're really sort of searching our memory of old TWABs now. But
volatile's like the code of the Commander Titan thing, isn't it? Where it kind of makes a target, it'll explode, and then
it'll explode it once you then kill it.
Triggers.
Yeah.
And I pity anyone who's joined this video halfway right there, like, what the
the positive ones are like suppress, invisibility, and devour, I think.
Devour's like a lifesteal effect. Suppress, as it sounds, takes abilities away. And interestingly, you wrote this in your piece on Void, which you can check out on the site now. All the grenades, which previously multiple of which were bespoke to the class, to classes Hunter, Titan, Warlock, are now being shared across, which I think is a mouth-watering for people who've kind of wanted to run previously, you know, a magnetic grenade on a warlock, for instance, or to try, like, going back to the verbs, some amount of invisibility on a Titan. God bless those big idiots running around invisible.
Yeah, and like suppression grenades will have some serious utility in the campaign and beyond if like the Hive have light powers, because it's all about suppressing the abilities and things. Like a Hive can trigger a super and you can just suppress them right out of it.
I'm conscious there's a strong danger of us disappearing up our own butts here, but I really do want to quickly touch on weapon crafting, which for me was the thing I kind of really nerded out when they were showing this. I think they said there's kind of 50 or so weapons coming with Witch Queen / Season of the Risen, which is the new season, which drops at the same time. And all the legendary ones of those, which I think there are about 42 or so, you're going to be able to craft. And by craft, you're going to kind of have to go out into the wild. This is how I think the loot works. You go out into the wild. Occasionally a gun will drop with a red border around its icon, and then when you fulfill certain criteria, which seem to be shooting stuff largely, no shot
for basic materials,
you'll be able to then extract materials or a specific perk from that gun, and then that becomes part of your kind of crafting recipe for that gun if you've already found the template. I mean, it's classic Destiny, right? There's a lot of materials, there's going to be a grind, there's going to be a loot, but I think the reason people are so excited about it, or certainly I am, is it feels like it's going to take out some of the wilder RNG when it comes to kind of getting a particular gun you want. And I think it's going to feel like your time will be respected in a way that perhaps it wasn't in the past. You know that on a long enough timeline, if you really want gun X with perks Y and Z, that's something you can just deterministically go after. To me, it's ideologically a big shift for Destiny.
And a good one, because as you say, like, it's one, if there's a gun you love, like say you particularly love Servant Leader,
which you
do, but you've got to, like, because it's in the Gambit perk pool, it has a ridiculous number of perks, and that means you've just got to play Gambit over and over, and the drop rate of the gun is itself low, and the way and the drop rate for a specific perk combination then becomes exponentially ridiculous.
I mean, the numbers are disastrous. It's when people do the maths, it's the kind of numbers where there's an asterisk at some point in the number, and you're like, "Oh, that's not good."
And so you can be playing just endlessly, but you theoretically might never get that combination you want. And I think, like, the Destiny community talks a lot about god rolls, but I think
that being the dream combo,
combo of perks, and it used to be, of course you want like Outlaw Kill Clip or whatever for your gun. I think the more they dig into things like Headstone with Stasis or Demo for Warlock Grenade builds or Demolitionist, I shouldn't truncate perk names in an already dense video. The more they do that, like, the more the concept of the god roll is going to shift for each person depending on what mode they're playing and what build they're doing. And if you're at the point where you need to, like, have 4 different god rolls per gun based on which activity you're doing, your vault is screwed.
I mean, the game, the vault thing, the game has turned us all into the most degenerate hoarders possible. Most of us, your vault is essentially your kind of like your permanent, like, long-term inventory, which has like 500 slots in, and most of us are hovering around like 480, 490, and spending, you know, a third of our time in the game doing kind of Sophie's choice with weapons, trying to decide what to delete. And I think the idea behind crafting, because you can recraft an existing weapon at any time, and you can actually change one you've already crafted, you take it back to the shop essentially and retool it. And it should take so much pressure off the vault, in theory at least, at a time when they've come out and said they are not going to be adding any more space to it as part of Witch Queen. So they had to do something, right? And I think this is a really good solution. And I think going into this, I don't know how you feel, Phil, but it seems like the community is I mean, I guess they're always positive before a new expansion, but it does feel like at the moment the studio, you know, is in a good spot.
Like, inevitably there will be complaints when it comes out because, you know, it takes too long to get this type of material that you need for this perk, or it just takes too long to level up. But at the end of the day,
it's never straight away, Phil. That would be crazy.
But even if it does take a long time, like, the fact that you can work towards exactly what you want, and you know that at the end of the grind you will get it. Like, it's 100% certainty that you can get those perks. There's no luck there. There's just sort of time investment. If it's something you love and want to put the time into, then hell yeah, that's great. And as Bungie said, like, they expect a lot. There are two menus for crafting. There's shape and there's reshape, and they expect a lot of people at first will be in the shape menu. They'll be crafting new guns. They'll be sort of getting used to the system. But as the year goes on, as you get used to the system, you're going to be spending all your time in reshape. You're going to be changing different combinations, trying out new things, and I think that's really where we'll see sort of how powerful this system can be.
Yeah, the real magic of it, I think, as you noted in your piece as well, is that this is going to be the thing that makes us put down our old guns and get rid of them. And that was something they really struggled with before. I'm much more excited about the new stuff now, because being able to craft these weapons, the fact they actually come with an additional perk on all of them called an origin trait. I think, Bungie toyed with sunsetting before, which was essentially hard forcing us to get rid of all our old shit, and the pitchforks were out, the same day, and it was a complete disaster. And I think they seem to have really learned some good lessons. So that's Witch Queen. February 22nd, you and I will be playing it for sure, an unhealthy amount, and we'll have more on site about it.